All right, and we are back. If you were just joining us, you were listening to This is Cannabis on XRAY FM, the show that takes an insider look at the Oregon cannabis scene. My name is Lee Henderson, and with me in the studio is my co-host Emma Chasen, and we are answering listener emails today. I'm going to get right back into it. Next question. How much does someone's endocannabinoid system fluctuate from day to day?
Good question. It will be very personal, dependent on how much your physiology fluctuates day to day. Typically, it's a lot. The endocannabinoid receptor system is really intrinsically related to our endocrine system, so to our hormones, and it fluctuates with hormone fluctuations. And so if your hormones are fluctuating daily, and so therefore your endocannabinoid system is basically constantly fluctuating.
In flux.
In flux, yeah. I can't really quantify that for you, listener, in terms of like it fluctuates this much or in this time span or every 5 minutes or something like that. But I think it's pretty safe to say that it's constantly in flux.
Okay. Next question. What is the latest research regarding the endocannabinoid system? What new receptors have been found?
So it is important to note that we really don't know a ton about the endocannabinoid receptor system at all. We are still just beginning to uncover exactly how it works with our body, how it's related, what receptors belong to the endocannabinoid receptor system.
We know unlocking more ghosts.
Exactly, opening more doors.
Remember the ghost receptor thing that I learned from way back?
Yes.
Sorry.
Yes. And really finding the home for more orphans. What receptors that we don't know what kind of like family they belong to, they're called orphan receptors because they don't have a family. They don't have a home just yet.
May I have some more? Okay. If you don't eat your meat, you can't have any pudding.
Oh my God. That's sad.
Told you it was going to be loose, folks.
Wow. So we do know definitively that the endocannabinoid receptor system has the CB1 and CB2 receptor. I believe I've talked about that at length, so I won't really go into them there. There are two new receptors that are piquing scientists' interest, GPR55 and GPR18, and they are technically considered these orphan receptors because there's just not enough conclusive scientific evidence for scientists to say, oh, they do belong to the endocannabinoid receptor system. But they are found in specific locations in the body, all throughout the central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system. And there is great potential and promise for them to be able to regulate pain and inflammatory response. And they can engage phytocannabinoids. More so, it's pointing to that they can engage endogenous cannabinoids in some way to help modulate these inflammatory responses. And so that's where the theory that, oh, maybe they do belong to the endocannabinoid receptor system is coming from.
Right.
And GPR18 in particular, it's found in the spleen and in peripheral blood leukocytes and lymph nodes, and again speaks to more of like an immune modulatory response. So it's helping to regulate the immune system, to keep it in balance, helping to regulate inflammation. It has a hand in destroying inflamed cells, which is cool. What
does that mean?
So when you have a cell or an inflammatory leukocyte, the engagement of GPR18 could lead to what's called apoptosis of that, which is just when they blow it up. They blow up a cell. If you let an inflamed leukocyte kind of hang out, it could lead to other problems. It could lead to inflammatory disorders. It could lead to disease. It could lead to an autoimmune response. And so it's good. You want to kill these cells. You want to blow them up. And that's...
You want to apoptosis
You
them.
want to apoptosis them.
That's a fun word.
It is. I really like that word.
Yeah.
And that's engagement of GPR18 could lead to that.
Right.
Could have that happen.
So let me ask you this. Who is doing this research?
That's a good question. People around the world.
Yeah.
Israel
Right.
is
A lot of studies in
really
Israel, I
leading the
understand.
charge in in cannabis research, but they're moving more in the vein of like human clinical trials and then product formulations based on that scientific evidence, specifically looking at a single disease and just trying to optimize the formulation of cannabinoids and terpenes to best manage that disease.
Yeah.
So ALS, autism,
Hyper-specific. Yeah.
ADHD, they're actually looking at a lot of those conditions right now. Cancer is a really hard one because it's just such a big beast. I mean, there are tons of types of cancer, even within like leukemia, lymphoma. There are like tons of types of leukemia, lymphoma, right? So it's a really hard one to tackle, but they are trying to take on more of that human clinical trial research. I also know that there are, I've read recently a bunch of research that's coming out of Finland and kind of the more Nordic countries up there.
Come from the land of the ice and snow.
Exactly. So yeah, people around the world who are doing it. India, I believe that the study that I'm citing right now to talk about these orphan receptors, I believe came from India.
Orphan receptors would be like a cool like DJ name.
Orphan receptors,
yeah.
bruh.
Next question. What is the active metabolite of CBD and how does it affect experience?
So the active metabolite of CBD is CBD, cannabidiol. Before that, it is CBDA, which is the acidic version of CBD, which is quote unquote the raw cannabinoid before it has been decarboxylized, decarboxylated to form its active metabolite, which is cannabidiol.
I think I knew that one.
Yeah.
That would be the one thing anyway, that's the one. Okay, next question. How do you best suggest cannabis after a consultation with someone?
So that you really have to take in, or I like to take in, all of the different factors.
Right.
That
This is presumably a bud tender asking.
Yes. That will help to kind of create the best possible experience that the customer or the patient is looking for, whether it's optimized for symptom relief or just for like relaxation or whatever it may be.
Right.
You have to look at their lifestyle. You have to look at if they have kids. Do they work a high-powered job?
Why do kids are a job factor?
So
I don't disagree. I'm just...
Yeah. So for me, typically I want to know if somebody has kids because that will inform usually how high they're willing to get, when they can consume, when they want to consume. Of course, that's not to say that everybody who has kids can or should only consume at night after their kids go to sleep or something like that. But it will... From my experience working with people who do have kids, it's typically like, okay, well, I need something, let's say, to manage my pain, and I need it all day, but I need to be relatively lucid and still engaged with my children. And so there you can be a little bit high, but maybe I would encourage them
I'm on the clock still.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's a job. It's a constant job. And so encourage them to go maybe for a more mixed ratio of a combination of THC to CBD. And then if we want to suggest something else at night, that's a little bit higher in THC concentration after their kids go to sleep or something like that. With a high-powered job, again, there usually is a desired sense of lucidity there from the consumer side. So that's part of their experience. That again, if they're trying to manage symptoms, if they're trying to manage mental health, emotional health, whatever it is during the day, but they have a very stressful job that they need to be quote unquote on for, then we would look at something that's higher in CBD for that daytime experience.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And so really it is about gathering as much information as you can about the person that you're working with during the consultation in terms of, again, lifestyle, not only involving if they have kids or if they have a high-powered job, but also just like their general state of wellness. Do they exercise frequently? What's their diet like?
Are they prone to anxiety?
Exactly. Are they prone to anxiety? Are they on any other medication? Because that's huge.
What's the interaction there?
like drug interactions?
Yeah, I mean, if I would have, I used to take Wellbutrin for ADHD,
It's like,
and I've taken Prozac in my life, you know what I mean? Which I know I haven't, since I quit drinking, I haven't been back on Prozac, but I know that the Prozac I was taking when I was drinking probably wasn't doing all that well because I was mixing the two, you know what I mean? Like, so how do, like, I don't mean other drugs, I mean like, ADHD medication or that's not anti-anxiety. What's Prozac?
Like an SSRI?
Sure, yeah.
Antidepressant.
Antidepressant, thank you.
Yeah. So to date, there are no like significantly harmful drug interactions between cannabinoids and other pharmaceuticals. There are definitely interactions though. So for example, if you take an opioid, since the endocannabinoid receptor system is so linked to the opioidergic system, you will probably feel a way more intense effect or experience if you take opioids with cannabis. Typically, like for an antidepressant or an SSRI or something like a benzodiazepine, like a Xanax, which is really designed for that anti-anxiety response, it will lead to hopefully a dose reduction in that pharmaceutical because the cannabis just makes it feel that much stronger. With SSRIs, it's interesting. It's still, to me, a very kind of like muddy gray area because SSRIs, while they're not...
As far as the research goes?
As far as the research goes with cannabis. Because SSRIs, they're serotonin reuptake inhibitors, so they prevent the serotonin from degrading in your system, allows it to accumulate more in the synapses between the neurons, and therefore makes you feel happier. It creates more of a balanced serotonin system if you were in imbalance, which leads to less anxiety. Cannabis and cannabinoids can interact similarly with the serotonin system, and so therefore combining cannabis and SSRIs, we don't know if that's necessarily a good interaction.
Like a symbiotic
exactly.
one,
if it's a symbiotic one or if it's something that
one dulls the effect of the other, perhaps.
Yep, exactly. So not enough conclusive scientific evidence at all to speak to those kinds of interactions and something to definitely monitor. And so that's where I've worked with a lot of patients and customers who were trying to wean off of their SSRI, who were looking to supplement with cannabis to make up for that. And what I found to work really well just from working with people was a very low dose CBD, like did the trick. And we're talking like 2 milligrams of CBD sublingually administered. So it was an immediate onset of effects. They didn't have to smoke. And that really helped diminish the side effects of coming off of an SSRI, because the side effects of coming off of an SSRI, of coming off of most pharmaceuticals are rough. It's not great, especially if you are somebody who's prone to anxiety and stuff like that. And so, yeah, when talking about how to best help somebody purchase cannabis or integrate it into their lifestyle, I recommend to look at all of the factors, to really take the whole picture and really listen to your patient and consumer.
Which is more important, do you think, physical health or mental health?
Ooh, I think
if you had to choose,
if I had to like Sophie's choice. I think that I think that all states of health are incredibly important. So I'll say that. If I had to choose, I would honestly say mental health, just because mental health is so informative of physical health. I was actually just having this conversation with my friend, and we were talking about a kind of article or study that she had recently read about how mental health really informs physical health. That like if you are stressed, it will hold in your body, it will hold in your tissues, and you can develop inflammation because of that. I think that the mind-body link, I think it's way more connected than we even understand at this point. And so I think that, one, it's absolutely necessary to take it into consideration when you are trying to help somebody in the realm of health and wellness, and that's not being done right now kind of as like a starting point, right? And so I think that we need to at least destigmatize that kind of conversation around mental health, because it absolutely informs and in some cases drives physical health.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting to me. I feel like, and maybe this is just a symptom of me paying more attention, or, with things like digital media and social media, you just hear more about more things more of the time now. But I feel like the conversations around like anxiety and depression are everywhere all the time. You know what I mean? And I take that stuff real seriously, maybe it's just a function of now that I'm I'm 41 and I'm paying more attention to that sort of thing. Maybe it was always like this, but I don't feel like it is. I feel like you're hearing more and more about how much of I don't want to say a killer, but how prevalent anxiety and depression is in and again, sort of across the generations. There's a lot of things I've read a fair amount of articles lately about teen depression, teen anxiety, and how it sort of dwarfs the common understanding of how it's been, heretofore, and then certainly in it feels like I pay a lot of attention to people online. I'm a big Twitter user, for instance, and I feel like that's just a constant conversation happening on Twitter. Is just talking about anxiety, depression. There was a famous comedian, relatively famous comedian, who just committed suicide last week in Los Angeles, who had struggled with anxiety and depression, and a lot of people like Mark Maron and Patton Oswalt and Sarah Silverman were good friends with this guy, and so I was seeing a lot of remembrances of him and talking about they were doing the suicide hotline thing in their tweets or whatever. It's interesting. You know?
Absolutely, and I think that the conversations that are happening are so important and only further help the destigmatization of mental illness and mental health as not something that is a weakness, but that it's something that is a disease and that actually could lead to other more physical body diseases. And
my back, which has been screwed up now for about a month. I've seen two doctors or seen a chiropractor and another, and they both said like, how's your stress level? And I'm like, not good. And they're like, yeah, there you go.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, digestive disorders are largely a product of stress and anxiety. There's so many serotonin receptors in our gut. Skin disorders as well are so linked to the gut, and there's serotonin receptors in the gut. And when we get stressed and anxious, skin can become inflamed. I know a lot of people who struggle with skin disorders that really flare up when they're in a state of stress. Yeah. And so it's something that needs to be talked about more, I think, and addressed more, because the way that taken seriously. Taken seriously, exactly.
Because it can be such like I don't want to say like an eye rolly thing, but it's sort of like even I roll myself sometimes when I talk about like my anxiety levels or what that kind of thing. I'm like, everybody, because part of it is like, well, everybody has anxiety, everybody's stressed out, but I do feel like, I know there are plenty of people who I feel like metabolize that stress in a way that is so much more productive or healthy. My wife is a good example of that. Someone who really metabolizes stress in like in a constructive-ish way, versus me, who doesn't so much,
And those coping mechanisms, those coping strategies, I mean, they need to be taught. They need to be taught from the time that we are children, and that has not happened up until recently. I think it's also very interesting, the conversation between the gender difference in the diagnosis and then prescription of pharmaceuticals to children, where we see boys who are systematically overdiagnosed with ADHD and fed ADHD medication, and then girls who are systematically overdiagnosed with anxiety and depression and then fed that. Exactly. Where, I mean, that then is a systemic gender problem, sociologically.
I've also, for what it's worth, and we should move on, but like I've seen a couple things recently where they say that women's pain is taken less seriously, like medically, by like a crazy factor.
God.
Yeah,
it's wild.
And it breaks down from there, into sort of race and class and.
Yeah.
Like the infant mortality rate in this country, especially for like black women.
It's the number one.
Is crazy.
In quote unquote developed nations.
Yeah, it's like 19th century.
Yeah, it's
levels.
Horrifying.
Yeah. All right, we got kind of off track there. All right, so this is going to be the last question. These were really great questions, and listeners, we really appreciate it. Please continue to send questions to our email, which I will read at the end. When is cannabis not recommended for use? This is, I feel like, a good question to go out on.
Definitely. If you're a young adult, so
Right.
if you,
This is the biggest one to me.
yeah, if you are somebody who is under 21, THC, not recommended for use. Now, of course, there are caveats to that general rule of like, if you are a young person who is struggling with a disease, that cannabis could potentially act as a lifesaver.
A friend of mine has a high schooler who has Crohn's.
Yes. Then for sure evaluate that option and take it into consideration and take it seriously. But for young adults who want to use it more recreationally, don't. It can cause a lot of cognitive distortion that we still do not have sufficient scientific evidence to really quantify and measure later in life.
Especially in, I want to say, especially in males, the brain is still developing.
Absolutely.
Well into, well past your teen years. And this is serious stuff. I mean, I was someone who used a lot of cannabis when he was, going back to like 14. And I think ultimately that I had, cognitive and probably even emotional issues that I don't want to put the blame squarely on. It was a lot of things going on. Yeah, I mean, I think I wish I'd waited. I'll put it that way.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that you're really the gray matter of the brain isn't fully developed until you're like 22 to 25, some window in there. And so to introduce cannabinoids, specifically THC at such a young age can cause real cognitive distortion and kind of inform the way that your brain develops and in not necessarily a great way. Can cause memory impairment and anxiety and depression and all that kind of stuff. So not recommended for use for anybody who's under 21.
Okay, so past that,
really more so THC. If you are somebody who struggles with low blood pressure, I would be careful with THC.
Why is that?
THC elevates the heart rate. It acts as a vasodilator, which means it opens up your blood vessels, which means it lowers your blood pressure. So anybody who's consumed like a ton of THC and then passed out, that's why. Which
I've seen.
Yes. Yep. You take a huge bong rip or something and just pass out on the floor. Yep. So be careful with THC if you have low blood pressure. If you are prone to anxiety and or psychosis, be careful with THC because it can trigger anxiety, paranoia.
Let your budtenders know that when you are making your purchase decisions.
Exactly. And there, I mean, you can get around that by engaging in microdosing, engaging in very, very small doses to see how it makes you feel. And then just really be true to your own experience. If you don't have a good experience, you do not need to consume THC again.
Don't keep trying.
Exactly. You don't need to keep trying if you don't want to. It's okay. And so there I would recommend to be careful in those zones. With CBD, it's less risky because it doesn't have that super psychotropic nature. If you are taking some anti-epileptic drugs, though, you do need to be careful with CBD. CBD has potential as an anti-epileptic therapeutic agent, and so a lot of people with epilepsy look to manage their disease with CBD, and that's great. That's cool. But if you are on other drugs such as clobazam, I believe, and some other anti-epileptic drugs, it can have some negative drug interactions there. Again, typically it would look like a dose reduction of your pharmaceutical, but it's something that you want to carefully manage, hopefully with a doctor.
Right. Okay, great. All right. So thank you, Emma.
Thank you.
Thank you, listeners, for sending those questions. And that was great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed it.
Very informative. Let's leave it there. You were listening to This is Cannabis on XRAY FM. We'll be right back. Keep rolling. Thank you for staying with us. You were listening to This is Cannabis on XRAY FM, the show that takes... Thank you for staying with us. You are listening to This is Cannabis on XRAY FM, the show that takes an insider look at the Oregon cannabis scene. My name is Lee Henderson, co-founder of Portland craft cannabis company Hi-Fi Farms, and with me is Emma Chasen, the founder of Eminent Consulting, the sage-like Emma Chasen.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, the wise lady that you go visit on top of the mountain.
Oh my God, that's so nice.
Yeah. And now is the time when we make recommendations.
Hell yeah, we do.
Hell yeah, we do.
Hell yeah.
What's up, dog? What do you got?
What's up? It's gonna be a no from me, dog. Just kidding.
Guys, told you it was gonna be loose.
So I watched all of Russian Doll on Netflix in one sitting the other night. I came home. I thought I was gonna have to do like a really.
So Russian Doll is what? I'm sorry.
Okay, so yeah, sorry. So Russian Doll is a new series on Netflix. That's like a similar concept to like Groundhog's Day.
With Bill Murray.
But this one is with Natasha Lyonne,
who's awesome.
Is awesome. Yeah, she's been in a ton of stuff. Most recently, Orange is the New Black, and she is phenomenal.
I
and
cannot wait to watch this.
It is wonderful. I mean, just like whip smart humor too, which I found delightful. The concept is really fun, but also dark, like pretty dark.
Deals with a lot with her because she was had a pretty bad drug addiction. She was a heroin addict, and so I understand
in real life. The actress.
In real life, Natasha Lyonne did.
Yeah. And
there's a lot from what I've read. I'm sorry to interrupt. There's a lot of recovery talk, or like recovery. When I say recovery, I mean like drugs and alcohol recovery, sobriety recovery concepts that are in this show. Sort of,
Yes, and really talking about anxiety and depression. I mean, it deals a lot with childhood trauma, about how childhood trauma can manifest later in life if you don't kind of look at it and examine it and therapeutically let it go. And how it can like really mess up time and your sense of yourself and allowing yourself to grow.
Right.
And it also kind of ties into how we are intrinsically related to other humans randomly and how their experience can affect our experience. And so it deals with some really heavy concepts and stuff, but all in this really like smart, timely, humorous, sardonic way. And I love that type of humor.
Totally.
That's really what entertains me the most, because it's real. Like there's an authenticity to it that I love. And each episode is just like 25 minutes. So you just like barrel through them. And it was wonderful. I had planned like a whole like late night work night with Matt, my business partner, and we ended up getting done a little bit early. And so I got home and smoked a joint and watched the entire series, and it was awesome.
And I've done a lot of reading about the show. They say it's just as good, if not better, on a rewatch. On the second viewing.
I bet. I mean, I would watch it again. I would definitely watch it again in a
It's actually like recommend, like in the way that like Fight Club, is good on a second viewing, or like The Sixth Sense, or The Usual Suspects, one of those kinds of things. Like you watch it again, you're like, oh, I didn't see that the first time.
I bet. I mean, there are so many little intricacies and moments that I will probably end up watching.
I can't wait to see it. We've been so busy with the family. Like again, it's been a very family heavy time with the kids being out of school and stuff, but I think we're going to do it. We're going to try to watch the whole thing on Sunday.
Awesome.
Yeah.
You should.
Cool. Great. Well, I have two quick recommendations. The first is I finally saw Roma. It was the last movie besides Green Book and Bohemian Rhapsody that I did not care to see before the Academy Awards, and on Saturday night I watched Roma, and oh my God, it was so beautiful.
That's what I've heard.
So amazing,
really phenomenal.
It was so good. I cannot tell you how good it was, except to say just take the time and watch it, and watch it with the subtitles. So funny story. It's a foreign language film. It's in Spanish. And I did not put the subtitles on for the first 45 minutes or so on Netflix.
Why?
I don't know. I just assumed, this is why. I assumed that the movie would be subtitled.
Okay.
And then it wasn't, and I was like, well, all right, I guess this is how Alfonso Cuarón is meant for the movie to be, and you'll just, because you can tell what's happening, I don't speak Spanish. And then eventually I was like, I got to know what they're saying, and I was like, oh, I can put this. Oh, and then I stopped it and I started it back from the beginning. Watched the first 45 minutes over again. Okay. So it is better with the subtitles on, folks. Don't make that mistake. Kind of a bonehead mistake. That's a real good peek behind the curtain of my life. But it was oh my God, this movie was just incredible. So I cannot recommend Roma any higher.
Awesome.
And then very quickly, my second recommendation is a new podcast that I have just started. It is available I believe it's only available through Spotify. It's done by Spotify, and it is the history of the Clash. And it is awesome. It is narrated by Chuck D.
Cool.
And it's very expertly done. They use a lot of, a lot of clips of the Clash. Again, it's a podcast, so it's all audio. But the Clash, one of my favorite bands of all time, the only band that mattered. When I first started kicking around ideas for this show, and I was giving concepts to my buddy who did the artwork for this show. One of the ones we were doing a lot of talking, and there's a song called "Know Your Rights" by the Clash, and the first line of that song is, "This is a public service announcement with guitars." And like my tagline for the show originally was, "This is a public service announcement with robust terpene profiles." It didn't stick. I was like, I don't think I'm enough, whatever. But the Clash is like one of my top 5 favorite bands of all time, and so I'm very excited. The podcast just started. Again, it's on Spotify.
Cool.
It's called.
I thought when you said that you started a new podcast that like you were doing a new podcast on the Clash, like you were hosting it. It's like, Lee, you did not tell me that you have a new podcast baby out in the world.
That I'm cheating on you?
Yeah.
Let me see. So the podcast is called Stay Free, The Story of the Clash, and it's done by Spotify Studios. Again, narrated by Chuck D from Public Enemy, which is super awesome. But yeah, really great.
Awesome.
Really, really great. So totally, that is like, they're hitting all of my buttons. Okay, cool. All right, so that all right. Well, that does it for this week's Cannabis.
Awesome. This was fun.
I'm gonna do that again. Well, all right, that does it for this week's This is Cannabis. Please remember to email questions and comments to thisiscannabis@xray.fm. We eventually will answer your questions.
Yes, we will.
Also, please be sure to follow us on Facebook and Instagram. Our handle is @ThisIsCanna on XRAY. This is Cannabis is engineered by Will Romy, and our theme music is the song Impossible OK by Portland artist Motric. Please be sure to check them out on Spotify. Emma, one more time, thank you so much for answering those questions. I thought that was great. Thanks for letting me interrupt you with stupid jokes.
That's okay. That's what you're here for.
And musical references.
That's what you're here for.
All right. Wubba, wubba, wubba. Good night and good luck, and thanks so much for listening.